But first tonight, it's been said that picture books are not just for children, but for everyone, because they give readers of any age a chance to slow down and get lost in a story. Phuc Tran is a writer and former teacher who lives in Portland, and he just had his first book published that's for kids.
It's a picture book called Cranky, and it came about in an unusual way because the illustrator, Pete Oswald, had already come up with the idea for the story, and his team approached Phuc Tran about writing it.
They sent me an email and they said, would you ever in a million years consider writing a children's picture book? And I said, sure, why not? Always take the meeting, right? So we get on the Zoom and they pitched me this idea of this like cranky, sort of like really moody construction vehicle, this crane. And they were like, we think you'd be perfect for it. I was like, oh, okay.
As a writer, Phuc Tran had published only one book before this one, Saigon, a memoir of how his family fled Vietnam and settled in the United States, where Phuc, as a boy, often felt as though he simply didn't fit in. It strikes me as really interesting that someone read your memoir, which is a serious, emotional, poignant piece of work. And then they said, this guy would be just right for writing a book for kids. I mean, I understand that writers are versatile and that you don't have to just stay in one lane, but it's interesting that after reading that book, they came to you and said, how about writing for children?
I agree, and I think they just really loved, there was a rawness or something in the voice, you know? So I wrote the book that I would have wanted to read for my kids, and it's a little bit snarky, but heartfelt and a little bit cranky, and, it doesn't pull punches, and it's complicated, and it leans into the complexity of how kids feel. And
a lot of people think, wrongly, it's easy to write a book for kids, that you can read a book for kids in 10 minutes, and therefore, you ought to be able to write one in about an hour.
Yeah.
How did it work for you? How long did it take for you to come up with the idea and then execute it?
I don't know if I could, name a specific, amount of time that it took me to write, but it is very challenging. I would say it's adjacent to writing poetry. I'm not a poet. I've not written poetry. Nobody wants me to do that. But I think there's a compression there that's really challenging.
The book tells the story of Cranky, a crane that is definitely cranky and annoyed when the other characters, who are also heavy construction equipment, try to cheer him up. And yes, the idea was to have these characters be more human than machine.
Like Cranky enjoys crème brulee, he eats beans for lunch, and there's a band playing. So, we want them to do heavy machinery things, but ultimately their interactions and more things are human than not. It's a fun book, it's an entertaining book, but there's also a message here about opening one's emotions. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and giving kids permission to be cranky. And the other message is that Cranky's in a bad mood, but he's still really good at his job. So you can be in a bad mood, but you still need to show up and do the things that are expected of you and do, sort of rise to your responsibilities. So I think that it's complicated and it's hard to do, but I think we can ask kids to do hard and complicated things.
One of the things Phuc Tran wanted to do with this book was avoid a conventional storybook ending.
I was just embarking on the project. I was telling my daughters about the Cranky story. And I said, this is about this, crane who's really sort of, dyspeptic and unpleasant. And my younger daughter immediately said, oh, let me guess. It's about how he's cranky and then his friends help him not be cranky. And I said, actually, no, he's cranky the entire time. And she leaned across the table. She's like, tell me more. She knew. She was like, oh, this is different. I'm interested in this. Like a book that doesn't fix Cranky. Cranky is still cranky at the end.
Maybe it's because we work in a newsroom, but the whole theme of this book is one that appeals to us, isn't it, Sam?
Cranky, snarky, but heartfelt.
Right. And even though you're cranky, you still need to show up and do your job and do it well.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love the point, too, that he made about working through these big emotions. Because even at home with my little one, that's what we're working on right now is we all have these big cranky emotions sometimes. And it's about working through them. And then you got to keep going afterwards. So sometimes we're just a little cranky, and that's okay.
And I like his point about putting a little snark in books for children, even though they're for children. I think kids like that. They like a little snark. You don't want to overdo it, but they like that.
Yeah, and it fits with the character too, the pictures and everything.
They get that edge.
I like it.
We've got more information about Phuc Tran and his new book, Cranky, as well as his previous book, Saigon. You'll find that information in the 207 section of our News Center Maine website and app.